This video will look at some basic theory for genetic crosses. Before we go any further, I think it's important to discuss that this image here represents the cell, and inside the cell you have the nucleus. If you were to take a closer look inside the nucleus, you would find the chromosomes. On the chromosome then, you have a section of DNA that codes for a particular characteristic, such as hair colour, eye colour, etc. This section is called a gene. Genes can also be called alleles. By definition, an allele is a different form of the same gene. Each organism has a maximum of 2 alleles for each characteristic. For example, a person with brown eyes could have 2 brown eye alleles, or could have 1 brown eye allele and 1 blue eye allele. For the genetic cross questions, the alleles will be represented by the letters, and then you will have capital letters and you will have lowercase letters. So the capital letters represent a dominant allele, and the lowercase letters will represent the recessive allele. So there's some rules that need to be followed for dominant and recessive alleles. Firstly, when 2 dominant alleles occur together, the dominant trait is expressed. Secondly, when a dominant and recessive allele occur together, the dominant trait will be expressed. And lastly, when 2 recessive alleles occur together, the recessive trait is expressed. So what's important to note there is that if you have both a big and a small letter together, the big letter will always be expressed. So the dominant trait will always be expressed. And for a recessive trait to be expressed, you need to have 2 recessive traits. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is homozygous and heterozygous. So homozygous means that the 2 alleles are identical. So say, for example, you could have capital B, or you could have small b, small b. So what's important to know there is that the 2 alleles are identical or the same. On the other hand, then we have heterozygous, and that just means that the 2 alleles are different. So an example of that would be capital B, small b. So basically here what we have is 1 dominant and 1 recessive gene. So it's basically a hybrid or a mix of the 2 genes. So here is a basic example of a genetic cross that you might see coming up on, well, maybe more so the ordinary level paper than the higher level paper. What's important is that you understand the different terminology that they use. So in cats, black coat, capital B, is dominant over white coat. Give the phenotypes and genotypes for the offspring involving 2 cats whose genotypes are capital B, and small b, small b. The phenotype is the physical appearance of the organism. So say, for example, you'd give it in words rather than letters. So say something like brown hair, blue eyes, etc. The genotype of an organism is the genetic makeup of the organism. So it describes what genes are present. The genotype is represented by a mix of small and capital letters. So for example, capital B, capital B. Going back to the question then, it's important to know what you're looking at. So the first thing is that the 2 cats, their genotypes is capital B multiplied by small b, and that was given in the question here. So the first thing that we need to do is draw out our Punnett square, okay? And I'm going to put capital B, that's from this one, on the top, and I'm going to put small b along the side like so, and that's from this one here. So it doesn't matter which one goes on the top and which one goes on the side. So the first thing that you need to do is cross them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross a capital B multiplied by a small b is going to be capital small, and that comes from multiplying those 2. The next one is going to be capital and small again, and that comes from multiplying these 2. Next up then is again capital and small, and that's from multiplying these 2. And then the last one is going to be capital and small again, and that's from multiplying these 2. So all of the offspring here are capital B, small b. Since it said at the start of the question that capital B was the dominant trait, capital B, small b is all the offspring are going to be black. It's important that when you're writing genotype out that you write the capital letter first instead of the small letter, because it just gets you into a good habit when the questions get harder. So the phenotype is that they're all black, and the genotype is that they are all big B, small b. So that brings me to the end of this video. It just looked at a few definitions which are super important that you know and understand those, and then a basic genetic cross. In my next video, I'm going to show more complex genetic crosses.